Dani Asenov, the granddaughter of the Empire's only Grand Ducal family. This is a story about her. A revenge drama 500 years in the making. After her rebirth, she has 3 brothers who care for her at every moment. They're the Asenov Grand Ducal family's eldest son, Lucas Asenov. The second son, the older of the twins, Belatian Asenov. The third son, the younger of the twins, Sisei Asenov. And their grandfather, Pavel Asenov, was granted the title of the Empire's sole Grand Duke for his merit in vanquishing the Demon King 500 years ago. Time rewinds to 500 years ago. It was a world where magic and swords coexisted. At that time, the Demon King launched a war to occupy the fertile lands protected by the gods. The continent was plunged into chaos. Just in the nick of time, the great magician who received a revelation from the goddess of the stars, Rosianth, Pavel Asenov, appeared. He, along with other magicians, sealed the vicious Demon King. The demon tribe, having lost its leader, was driven to the barren lands on the other side of Wufeng. The great magician Pavel Asenov erected a giant magical wall over Wufeng, preventing the demons from breaking in again, and built a pristine white winter estate at the foot of the mountain. From then on, the Asenov Grand Ducal family took on the mission of guarding the winter estate. This is the famous Asenov legend that even a 3-year-old child in the Empire knows. But there is a huge mistake in this legend. The one the great magician Pavel eliminated was not the Demon King, but Dani's former self. Her former self was an ordinary magician living in Wufeng with her master, Galadriel. Her master happened to find her abandoned when passing by a poor family. Thus began his journey of raising a child. Although her master complained every day, he still passed on all his life's knowledge to his student, be it swordsmanship or magic. He demanded she practice them to perfection. After arduous training, his student grew into a magician who was also skilled with the sword. Then one day, while the protagonist was learning new magic, she saw a powerful move and hurriedly called her master over to see. She pointed to an ancient scroll and asked, "This kind of magic can still be effective even if used hundreds of years later, right?" She planned to cast this magic on her bag, but was met with her master's merciless ridicule. The protagonist argued that she had only forgotten the incantation last time. Her master reminded her that she could use her own name as an incantation. A name contains power and is unforgettable. It was worth a try. Master is indeed a master. So brilliant. He's so smart, but why does he live here? Could he be a wanted fugitive? Even if that were true, it wouldn't matter. To her, her master was her only family. She wanted to live here quietly with him forever. Suddenly, many talkative elves appeared in Wufeng, chattering about a treasure-laden ship. The protagonist overheard them and thought about getting her hands on the treasure to improve their lives. But then she wondered, why would these elves talk about this here? Weren't they afraid she would hear? So she concluded the elves were talking nonsense and remained skeptical. To understand these outsiders, she pretended to get along with them. She quickly learned that the Demon King had made Wufeng his base. They would throw a party whenever they won a battle. The protagonist continued to live in Wufeng, but she was awakened every day by the noise of the demons' parties. A month later, she finally couldn't take it anymore. She opened her door and screamed in frustration, "I don't care if you're the Demon King or whatever, just get the hell out here." At that moment, on a nearby mountain peak, a man sat leisurely on a throne. Soon, the protagonist came knocking. She confronted the Demon King, wanting him to keep the noise down. It was affecting her rest. The Demon King almost burst out laughing. "Excuse me? I'm the Demon King. You should figure out who you're talking to." He then drew his sword, intending to cut down this insolent, crazy woman. A flurry of action ensued. A laser battle of magic and swords. 3 minutes later, the Demon King lay on the ground. The protagonist found it unbelievable. She had never defeated her master, so how could she defeat the Demon King? He was the Demon King, after all. The Demon King was also embarrassed, trembling in disbelief that he had been defeated by a human. The once arrogant Demon King instantly knelt before the protagonist, sycophantically begging her to be the king of the demon tribe. The heroine was shocked. The great Demon King was actually like this. The Demon King excitedly announced that from now on, the protagonist was their new king. Ever since the Demon King was defeated, he became the protagonist's subordinate, following her like a shadow. The protagonist angrily told the Demon King that she didn't want to be their king and that they should go back where they came from and stop following her. The Demon King followed her with a serious expression, saying, You knocked me down, so you have to be our king." Seeing such a straightforward demon king, the protagonist was furious. How could the great demon king have so little ambition? The conversation between the protagonist and the demon king was overheard by two magicians. So she was mistaken for the demon king and killed by the Empire's hero, Pamela Asenov. Time passed. The protagonist woke up in a strange place. She seemed to hear something. The Grand Duke's granddaughter. She heard Asenov. Was it the Asenov who killed her? Hearing a voice from behind, Lucas turned to look, seeing the protagonist awake. The three of them rushed to her and surrounded her. They asked if she was feeling better. The protagonist saw three strangers. She touched her head, stunned, thinking, what is this situation? What's with all the commotion? Who are these people? They're talking about calling a quack doctor. Are they going to treat me? The protagonist asked who they were. The three brothers were momentarily stunned. Did she hit her head? Lucas introduced them as the heroine's older brothers. Hearing this, the girl was shocked. Sweating profusely, she managed to say, "Brothers?" The heroine was still dazed. She needed to sort out her thoughts. In this life, she was born into an ordinary family. Her parents passed away when she was young. She was adopted by a couple who ran a small inn. But life was not easy. She was constantly beaten and scolded by her adoptive father. She would always glare fiercely at her adoptive father, which only earned her more beatings. On the surface, she was a daughter, but in reality, she was no different from a slave. After being beaten, she still had to clean. While she was cleaning, her adoptive parents' biological daughter walked up to the heroine. She took out a torn and dirty dress. She told the heroine to take it as a gift. Hearing this, the heroine's eyes widened in anger. Just then, her adoptive father ran up and slapped the heroine, knocking her to the ground. He urged her to hurry up and work. The adoptive father grabbed her by the collar, glaring fiercely at the heroine. "Work if you can, or get out and die if you can't." The adoptive mother stood by, taunting her sarcastically, telling the heroine to be grateful to them, since they were the ones who adopted her. After dark, the guests left and the cleaning was done. The heroine returned to the small warehouse where she lived next to the stables. She picked up the tattered dress given to her by her adoptive parents' biological daughter and held it up. She was 3 years older than her adoptive parents' biological daughter, yet the dress was loose on her. Her shoes were about to become straw sandals. The food she ate was leftovers from the guests. Her body was stained with horse manure. Danae dreamed every night that her biological parents were living with her, but her parents had lost their lives to a magical beast while saving her. For her, dreaming of her parents was already a great happiness. But in real life, she was bullied and cried herself to sleep every day. Such days changed with the shining appearance of a knight. This knight asked if her name was Danae. It was the first time she had seen such a dazzling knight. She felt he was special, so high and mighty that one dared not look at him directly. She answered meekly, yes, and asked the knight what he wanted. The heroine looked at the clean and tidy knight, a hint of discomfort on her face. Comparing herself to him, she wished she could run away immediately. Suddenly, her adoptive parents heard that the knight had arrived and came out to greet him. They asked him why he was looking for this scruffy child. The heroine listened to her adoptive father's disdainful words about her. She cried out of self-pity. How she wished she had new clothes and new shoes, that she was a clean and tidy person. She even thought that if only her skirt were a little longer, it could cover her dirty shoes. She sadly clenched her skirt. But such magical scenes only happen in fairy tales. How could it happen to her? Suddenly, the knight said, "Those purple pupils of yours are not a color that just anyone can have." The heroine was shocked. The knight respectfully said to Danae, "We've finally found you." Lady Danae Asenov, granddaughter of His Grace, Grand Duke Asenov. The knight said to Danae, "This is no place for you. I'm here to take you away." She was stunned. Did I guess it true? Hearing the knight's words about taking Danae away, her adoptive father immediately pulled her back, not letting her go. He whispered to Danae, "If you don't want a beating, don't leave this place." Hearing her adoptive father's words, she was immediately scared into tears. The knight also heard the adoptive father's words, and his expression changed drastically. Does this mean the young lady is usually beaten by her adoptive father? The adoptive father nervously waved his hands, evasively saying no. He even lied, claiming to be Danae's father. How could I hit her? Before he could finish, the knight kicked him into the wall. Danae saw her adoptive father being kicked, her mouth agape in shock. She thought, wow, he was kicked right into the wall. The knight bent down and asked her where she was usually hit. She nervously avoided the knight's gaze and mumbled, "My back and head." The knight stared at the adoptive parents with extreme anger. He picked up a wooden bucket and smashed it over the adoptive father's head. The bucket shattered instantly, shocking Danae at the same time. She thought, is this the same knight from before? So violent? This is terrifying. The knight began to hit the adoptive father in every spot Danae had been hit. Danae was so scared her legs gave out, and she collapsed on the ground. Ugh, so brutal. This is clearly paying him back double. After finishing the beating, the knight clapped his hands and prepared to leave with the young lady. The knight helped her up, and they walked out together. On the way back, he asked the young lady, "The breeze is refreshing today, isn't it?" Danae was still lost in the image of the knight brutally beating her adoptive father, unable to get over it for a long time. Although she was still a bit confused, it was the first time she had seen such a beautiful sky since her parents' death. Just like that, she escaped from the clutches of her adoptive parents. With a loud crash, their carriage was hit. Danae screamed in fear. "Are we being attacked by strange people?" The knight immediately shielded her. She felt like she was about to suffocate. Out of the frying pan and into the fire, the attacks on the carriage continued with a crash. The carriage door was flung open. What's happening? Why are we flying? Wow. So they were thrown from the carriage. With a splash, Danae fell into the sea. The knight anxiously ran to the shore. Danae sat blankly on the bed, staring at the ceiling. So it was because she fell into the water that she regained her past life's memories. Thinking about her past life made her so angry. To think she was mistaken for the Demon King and eliminated. In this life, she would get her revenge no matter what. Danae smiled wickedly. This current identity was perfect for revenge. After all, her mind was still filled with the magical knowledge from her past life. She was surprised that her name was the same in this life as in the last. Both were Danae. She recalled what her master had said before. Is it because I can use my name for magic? Suddenly, someone called her name, interrupting her brainstorming. She saw her second brother standing beside her. She felt he was like the bear she had seen in the forest in her past life. Her second brother smiled and welcomed her back. Her eldest brother explained to Danae that they were not actually her biological brothers. They were all adopted. Yes, adopted by Grandpa, the Grand Duke Asenov. Is the title Grandpa really appropriate? After all, I'm still doubting if I'm really the Grand Duke Asenov's granddaughter. Her second brother said her unique pupils were proof of her legitimate identity. Cupping his face, he said there was something else he was more concerned about right now. She casually asked what it was. She was suddenly lifted up by her second brother. It turned out her second brother thought she was too thin and looked very unsightly. Her other two brothers also noticed her frail physique, feeling she looked like an abandoned hybrid dog. Danae was speechless. There's no need for that kind of comparison. Being held in her second brother's arms made Danae a little uncomfortable. Her second brother told her not to look so glum. He pointed to Danae's chest and told her what kind of existence she was meant to be. Danae was shocked. What is he going to do to me? First, she was given a tour of the house. The furniture in the rooms was all splendid and magnificent. A room of her own had also been prepared for her. Seeing the room prepared for her, she was shocked. It was too luxurious. Her second brother saw her standing motionless and poked her head, thinking she still didn't believe it. Her second brother said she looked a lot like their grandfather, so she shouldn't argue. Besides, Hedding recognized her at a glance. Danae asked who Hedding was. She heard a familiar voice call her, Lady Danae. She turned to look. It was the knight who had beaten up her adoptive father at the inn. Hedding greeted the young lady. We meet again. At this moment, her eldest brother walked over and told Danae that Hedding was her personal guard. There's one more person to introduce. It was the maid responsible for Danae's daily life. Her name was Marina. She bowed to Danae and expressed her pleasure at meeting her for the first time. Danae was shocked. Is their life always this extravagant? The house was full of luxurious furniture and art pieces. There was also a night guard and an elegant maid. It felt like a dream. Marina invited the young lady to follow her. Still in a daze, she followed her without thinking. Suddenly, she heard the sound of flowing water. It was Marina helping her bathe. She looked completely comfortable. What a life. It was her first time taking a rose petal bath. It made her feel so happy. Marina saw the scars on the young lady's back and gently wiped them with a hot towel, feeling her pain. Next up, Tata, a shining debut. How can it not fit? The clothes were prepared by Heading based on the young lady's age. Why were they still too big? Danai knew in her heart. She had never eaten a proper meal at the inn, so she was smaller and thinner than others her age. Danai couldn't believe she was wearing such beautiful clothes. She happily told her guard and maid that she really liked them, and the fabric wouldn't easily chafe her skin. This was Danai's very first dress. Marina was combing her hair. Danai sat quietly, smelling the fragrance on her body, which made her feel drowsy. Danai suddenly woke up with a start. I have a goal. And here she was squandering and enjoying herself. She had forgotten she was supposed to be getting revenge. She suddenly remembered that Pamela was no longer of this world. So how was she supposed to get revenge? Although her mind held the magical knowledge of her past life, the mana needed for magic had disappeared. She had to find her mana first, Pamela Asenov. If it weren't for that guy, I wouldn't have had to suffer so much. But the current situation wasn't so bad. She glanced at Marina. Marina smiled back at her. In that case, let's just enjoy today. Tomorrow, I'll make a new revenge plan. Marina suggested the young lady take a tour of the house today. Then, she turned to get something she had prepared for the young lady. Tada! It was a basket covered with a pink cloth. Danai and Heading looked at the basket, bewildered. Danai picked up the basket and asked what was inside. Inside were black tea and snacks, in case the young lady got hungry while touring the house. Danai thanked Marina. Heading offered to carry the basket. Today, I'll accompany the young lady and make sure she has a good time. Heading took Danai on a tour of the house, explaining the purpose of each room. She pointed in one direction, wanting to go there. Heading followed behind her. Suddenly, she heard her third brother say she looked ridiculous, and she stopped in her tracks. He asked Danai why she wasn't wearing the clothes he had prepared for her. She lifted the clothes she was wearing. I am wearing them. I'm just smaller than others my age, so the clothes are a bit big. Danai was inwardly fuming. This third brother of mine is quite handsome, but why is he so annoying when he speaks? She muttered, well, no one else said I look strange. Of course. In this house, he's the only one who would say such a thing. He was also very sharp-tongued. What did you eat growing up, Danai? Why do you look like a scarecrow? She angrily raised her fist. I'm just a little smaller than others my age. I just need to alter the cuffs. As she raised her hand, the wound from her adoptive father's beating was exposed, and her third brother saw it. He suddenly lifted Danai up. She was so scared her eyes widened. She felt his strong magical power. I thought he was frail before, but his strength is incredible. Hearing him say he had the strength to carry a little brat like her, she was startled. She turned and asked, did I say something? He replied, Danai's expression says it all. Holding her, he took her somewhere. It turned out he was taking her here to eat. He could have just said so. Why did he have to carry me over? While eating, Danai thought about the powerful magic she had just felt from him. Truly unfathomable. Vigilance target number 1. She looked around. There was hardly any furniture. Why did he bring me here? She saw her third brother was still watching her. That look was as if he were watching a pet eat. How disgusting. She offered the almond cookie she disliked to see say. His eyes were sharp. No, thanks. I'm fine just watching you eat. Danai had a mischievous thought, wanting Sisei to eat the almond cookie she disliked. He told Danai to eat it all and not to mind him. She felt it was a pity. She had almost gotten him to eat something she disliked. In Sisei's eyes, she was like a pet that had just come home. Sisei was shocked. How could I think of my own sister as a pet? He quickly scratched his head to dismiss the thought. Why is he scratching his head and sighing? Suddenly, Sisei took the almond cookie from her hand and ate it. She was startled by Sisei's sudden closeness. After all, he had such a handsome face. After eating, Sisei instructed her to finish the rest. He thought she was too thin and was worried about her health. Danai heard someone caring about her. Sisei coughed twice and noticed Heading turning his head to smile. Suddenly, Sisei called out to him, telling him to come and open the door. When the door opened, her eyes were met with rows of beautiful and pretty clothes, as well as matching accessories and brand new leather shoes. Seeing this scene, Danai quietly hid behind the sofa. Sisei found her and also saw the cookie crumbs still at the corner of her mouth from when she was eating snacks. He took out a handkerchief and wiped it for her. This scene was witnessed by the servants who were tidying up. Sisei yelled at them to get back to work. The servants ran off, each faster than the last. He proudly told Danai to go change her clothes. He didn't want his sister walking around in ill-fitting clothes. Danai was shocked. Were all these prepared for me? He called over the person in charge of fittings that if there's any outfit she likes, have her try it on. I asked if they could finish by noon. She used the excuse of wanting to go back and read, but she actually wanted to go back and formulate her revenge plan. Hearing Cisse tell her to read at night, she was stunned. Are there that many clothes? Today, you have to try on at least 50 outfits. Will only be done by tonight. Hearing 50 outfits, I was momentarily stunned. She was pushed into the fitting room by the person in charge of fittings. After a while, the fitting person called for Cisse. I walked out in a new outfit. She shyly asked, "How is it?" Cisse replied, "The main thing is whether you like it." Cisse asked if she liked it. She smiled brightly. This was the first time she had worn such beautiful clothes. She heard Cisse add the outfit to the purchase list and jumped for joy that it's great to be rich, she thought. Fitting 2, not bad. Add to purchase list. Fitting 3. Cisse pointed out that the waist needed to be tailored to be slimmer. Fitting 4. Talk about overkill. Not qualified. Just like that, I kept trying on clothes, exhausted. Finally, she found it. It was the 30th outfit. She fell in love with it at first sight. This was the couture dress of her dreams. Seeing the snacks nearby, they seemed so out of reach for her now that I wish I could eat and rest. Cisse noticed something was off with her. He went to check. In a commanding tone, Cisse told her to walk to the chair. I thought, what's with that tone? Does he think I'm a family dog? She hesitantly took a step forward and tripped on her dress. Cisse, who was beside her, caught her in one swift motion. He immediately told the fitting staff to shorten the hem of the dress and to check if the leather shoes were comfortable for walking. I wanted to ask Cisse to let her rest for a while. By evening, it was finally over. She was exhausted and collapsed on the sofa. Cisse thought for a moment. He decided to order the last yellow dress she tried on as well. I was surprised. The last one too? Cisse saw her surprised expression. I asked there anything wrong with ordering it. He suddenly thought the one she tried on before was better. He got up to find the people from the clothing store, wanting to add it. I was shocked, adding that one makes it over 60 outfits. But that's fine too. It counts as me squandering the family's money. It's a form of revenge. She collapsed with a thud, but then she thought this little amount of money won't have any impact on this family. Hedding walked over to the young lady and expressed his concern that you've worked hard today, young lady. Are you also looking forward to seeing how beautiful the finished dresses will be? She lay on the sofa. Although she was looking forward to it, 60 outfits were too many. Hearing Hedding say that if the Grand Duke had ordered, it would be at least 100, she was so shocked she couldn't move. Hedding asked if she was feeling unwell anywhere. She used the excuse that she hadn't seen the Grand Duke yet and had been worried about it. Hearing Danai's words, Hedding smiled and comforted her. You don't need to worry. The Grand Duke is very fond of his own bloodline. I heard he cherished his son, young Master Lint, very much. Hearing her father's name, Danai's eyes suddenly widened. She lowered her head and said, but wasn't my father also driven out? Hedding wasn't sure about the specific situation, but he was certain that young Master Lint was not intentionally driven away. The Grand Duke always missed his family. He had also been searching for Lady Danai. Danai asked when the Grand Duke would return. Hearing Hedding say he would be back in a week, she became even more curious about what kind of person the Grand Duke Asenov was. In the blink of an eye, 6 days had passed. That Cisse fellow is truly terrifying. It's only been 6 days. Although not all 60 ordered outfits have arrived. What kind of magic did he use to get so many here in less than a week? Now, she also understood just how powerful the Asenov family was. Suddenly, her second brother opened her door looking for Danai. Marina looked at him, shocked. She angrily asked, this is the young lady's room. Please knock before entering. He awkwardly scratched his head. Next time, I'll definitely knock before coming in. Danai looked at the two of them, thinking Baelation will still barge in without a word next time. Baelation had heard that Cisse bought her dresses. Seeing Danai in her new dress, he praised her. You've really changed from head to toe. She asked Baelation, is it beautiful? It's really pretty, right? His expression was solemn. That it. She thought she had misheard. He only said, is it? Danai remembered Cisse's words. The most important thing is whether you like it. Even if Baelation didn't think it suited her, it didn't matter, because Danai herself liked it. Baelation suddenly became nervous. He quickly explained that he also thought the dress suited Danai and was very beautiful, but he was jealous that he wasn't the one who bought such a beautiful dress for Danai. Danai couldn't help but complain. Baelation was so big, but he was like a child. Danai still comforted the big boy before her. All it took was praising his strength and a round of applause. And Baelation's smile was as hard to suppress as an AK-47's recoil. Just then, Lucas walked in. Baelation scolded him. "Why do you enter a girl's room without knocking?" But Marina stated that young Master Lucas did knock when he came in. It turned out they were here to take Danai on a picnic. For this, Lucas had brought a sumptuous meal. He thoughtfully added that if it wasn't enough, he could have the servants make more. It seemed everyone was willing to do anything for Danai. This dazzling man seemed very cautious and thoughtful, also worth being wary of. At this moment, Danai suddenly remembered, are only the three of them going? Baelation explained that Sisei was very busy right now. Then Baelation urged Danai, if we don't hurry, the roses will wilt. Danai vaguely sensed that something was waiting for her. Arriving outside, Danai couldn't help but exclaim, "It's so beautiful." The unromantic Baelation, however, said, "They're just some plants. What's so beautiful about them?" At this point, Lucas was already prepared and called the two over. Danai suddenly asked a question. She wanted to know how the three brothers were adopted by the Grand Ducal family. Baelation explained that they were already very famous, and everyone knew them. They were adopted 10 years ago. At that time, Lucas was 10, and Baelation and Sisei were 8. Starting 15 years ago, the magical wall of woofing began to weaken, and various problems arose. As a result, magical beasts often appeared in the northern part of the continent, cruelly destroying many villages. The village where Lucas lived was no exception. He miraculously survived and was sent to an orphanage. Weren't there many other children in the orphanage? Why did the Grand Duke choose Lucas? Baelation jumped in to answer, because of his ability, because of his outstanding ability. Naturally, rumors about Lucas spread. So, their grandfather, who heard these rumors, adopted him. Brother Lucas is a genius with a photographic memory. He can even memorize a book this thick on the spot. Hearing Baelation constantly praise him, Lucas felt a bit embarrassed. That's just praise. Isn't Baelation also a great sword master? At this, Danai's eyes widened. Who? Baelación, a sword master. Baelation is the strongest swordsman who can infuse his sword with aura to fight others. Danai could hardly believe it. The ability she had painstakingly learned from her master through great hardship in her past life, Baelation also possessed. She thought he was just a strong, simple-minded fool. Comparisons are truly odious. Lucas, thinking the two were just playing around, felt that coming on a picnic was well worth it. Baelation was intimidated by Danai's aura and had to admit he was a fool, a kindred spirit to Danai. At this moment, she thought of Sisei. If the magical power she felt before was real, then that means Sisei, speak of the devil, and he shall appear. Sisei arrived before them. Danai went forward to welcome him, but was surprised to see Sisei looking extremely tired. But he didn't explain anything and instead asked Danai what she wanted to say. Danai immediately asked the question on her mind. Why did the Grand Duke adopt you? Sisei looked angrily at Lucas and Baelation. The next second, he snapped his fingers. A magic circle appeared out of thin air in the sky. Suddenly, it started raining roses from the sky. A sea of roses directly buried Danai. Only then did Danai realize that Sisei could use magic without incantations, and it seemed to be extremely powerful. Baelation explained that Sisei had obtained the title of sage, which meant he was a magician who had reached a certain level of mastery. Moreover, he had also achieved not so bad results in the magic tower. After graduating, Danai realized that being able to use such powerful magic in this era meant that magical technology and knowledge should not have declined compared to before. So why was the magical wall becoming weaker? Lucas asked how Sisei was doing. Sisei didn't speak, but gently shook his head. Danai noticed that the three brothers seemed to be deliberately hiding something from her. Baelation even said, "You little brat wouldn't know." In their eyes, Danai was still a child. Meanwhile, Sisei and Lucas were discussing something. But the more they acted like this, the more curious Danai became. Just then, Heading ran over, out of breath. He informed everyone that the Grand Duke was about to arrive. Perhaps because he heard the news, he was returning earlier than scheduled. At this, the three brothers all looked at Danai. Danai was somewhat confused. Inside the estate, the maids were frantically arranging everything, welcoming the Duke's return. Danai was a little scared. Marina saw Danai's panic and quickly came to comfort her. "You don't need to hide yourself." She also complimented her. The dress young Master Cisse bought for you suits you very well. Only then did Danae notice that, just as Heading had said, her view of her family was different from others. But now that she was wearing a well-fitting dress, she could stand up straight and walk with dignity. You think I'm afraid of you, Pamela Asenov? But when she saw the scale of the welcome outside, she found she was still very nervous. Seeing the tense and serious expressions of the maids and butlers, Danae couldn't help but guess he must be a very scary person. She started to worry if she would be scolded for buying 60 outfits. As the Duke approached, Lucas introduced him as the Duke. The three of them greeted the Duke. The Grand Duke also noticed the little girl before him. Lucas then introduced her as Pamela's descendant. Danae also sized up the man before her. He was tall and imposing. His purple pupils were exactly the same as her father's. But he simply asked, "Are you Danae?" After Danae answered, he walked away. This cold attitude caught Danae off guard. She couldn't quite grasp the Duke's attitude. Just then, the Duke, who had walked past Danae, suddenly turned and asked, "What do you like?" "I mean to eat." Danae had to answer truthfully, "Meat and chocolate cookies." So the Duke ordered, "Then prepare the menu according to what she said. Go and prepare it. We'll eat soon." Only then did Danae realize the Duke was inviting her to eat. The IT should be fine, right? Afterward, Danae and the Grand Duke's wonderful mealtime began. Previously, Danae had heard that her grandfather was looking for her. She didn't expect this grandfather to be much younger than she imagined. And he wasn't like Pamela. If he were like Pamela, Danae would surely be burning with rage. But this strange, quiet atmosphere made her a little uncomfortable. Finally, she couldn't help but speak first. She asked the Grand Duke why he suddenly started looking for her. He hadn't looked for her father, nor had he looked for her in 13 years. Who knew that the Grand Duke had not looked for her, but couldn't find her? It was her father, Lint, who was unwilling. Many years ago, at Lint's 18th coming-of-age ceremony, the Grand Duke had asked Lint to name anything he wanted. But there was only one thing Lint wanted. He wanted to go on an adventure in the outside world. He begged his father to give him freedom. His son chose not to become the heir of the Grand Ducal family, but to live a free life in the outside world. So after that, the Grand Duke never looked for Lint again. But a year ago, a wandering mercenary claimed to have been entrusted by Lint to deliver a letter to the Grand Duke. The Grand Duke deduced that his son had been attacked by a magical beast. This was the last letter he left. What he frantically wrote was mostly about Danae. However, the mercenary encountered a magical beast on the way and also contracted a plague, which is why the letter was delivered so late. As soon as he received the letter, the Grand Duke went to the village where he lived, but he couldn't find Danae. Thus began a long journey. They didn't even let go of rumors, traveling to almost every place. Finally, in a dilapidated inn, they found Danae. At this point, the Grand Duke asked, "Do you also want freedom?" Freedom often comes with a price. Remembering that memory, Danae couldn't stop trembling. So her answer was only one. She did not want to return to the outside world. Hearing Danae's answer, the Grand Duke's expression remained impassive. But he suddenly remembered something important. That was to have Danae call him Grandpa. At the same time, in the demon realm, Blanche was listening to his subordinate's report. It seemed they had finally found her. After learning the news, Blanche immediately celebrated with confetti. His Danae, the Demon King, had finally opened her eyes. But bad news came from his subordinate. They had sensed the Demon King's presence in the Winter Estate. "What? Grandpa?" Baelation was already laughing hysterically. A real granddaughter is different, after all. At this point, Danae noticed that the maids seemed exceptionally busy. Baelation explained it was because of the Senate meeting. The Asenov family holds this kind of meeting once a year. Everyone gathers together. The heads of the direct and collateral families gather to discuss important family matters, such as the family heir. And Danae, being related by blood to the Grand Duke, naturally became the first in line to succeed the Asenov family. Only then did Danae remember that she had almost drowned and died on her way home. It was because she was the Grand Duke's heir. To die inexplicably for a position she didn't even want, she never wanted to experience that again. But Danae also thought if she became the Grand Duke's heir, it should be easier to destroy the Asenov family. Although she had never thought of taking this position, she could give it a try to achieve her goal. But then she thought of what Marina had said. After Lucas came of age, he had always played the role of the heir. If Lucas hated her for this, what would she do? But Baelation said it was impossible for Lucas to hate her for this. On the contrary, he would thank her, because to be the heir, he would be forced to marry. They would make Lucas marry a woman from a collateral family and later establish him as the Grand Duke. That way, the bloodline issue would be solved. Hearing this, Danai couldn't help but exclaim, "That's too cruel." "It is cruel, but that's because we are nobles." The next second, Danai started poking Balation's face. She began to doubt if this was still Balation before her. Balation angrily said, "Do you really think I'm a fool? I know about these things." Danai expressed her doubt. Later, Danai knocked on Lucas's door. Even though Balation had said that, she still wanted to confirm the reaction of the person involved. Afterwards, she met with her brother Lucas, who was working. Lucas could tell at a glance that she had probably been with Balation during the day and heard something from him, which is why she came to find him. He directly told her not to worry about it. Everything was just returning to its rightful owner. But Danai was also afraid her brother would feel wronged. She heard that after Lucas was adopted, he had been taking lessons related to being the heir. Just looking at the attack on Danai, one could see the value of this position. This position held absolute power. Anyone would want to sit in this position. Even the collateral families coveted this position, trying to marry their daughters to Lucas. But Lucas was just as Balation had said. He was actually grateful to Danai because he didn't like getting married in that way. Then, Danai began her final test. She said she didn't want and wasn't suited for this position, and that it was more suitable for Lucas. Lucas thought Danai was saying this out of consideration for his situation. He knew this matter made Danai uneasy, but instead of worrying alone, she came to find Lucas. He thought this was the right thing to do, because not running away, not hiding, but facing it sincerely is the Asenov way. Even if she wasn't confident yet, it was okay. Lucas, Balation, and Cisse would all help her. Danai had been curious from the beginning. She wasn't their biological sister, so why were they so good to her? Because His Grace the Grand Duke is our savior, and you are the Grand Duke's beloved treasure. So to us, you are also a treasure. It was the first time Danai had been treated as a treasure. She understood Lucas's feelings, because to her, Master Lien was her savior. In the end, Danai made up her mind to become the heir. She would train her body and reclaim the power of her past life. Reborn into a new life, she decided to use the simplest method possible to become stronger, using the mysterious pills her master had made for her, filled with stamina and energy. If she took that, the magical power that others spent 5 years of painstaking effort to obtain, she could get effortlessly. Soon, she found the herb she needed called mylobin. Its habitat was in the northern part of the continent. Looked it up, but it's like I didn't. At this point, she wondered how her master knew the method for making this medicine and the way to cultivate magical power. I tried reading many books to find the knowledge my master had taught me, but most of it was unrecorded and rather strange. Even her master's existence was full of questions. He never talked about himself, so she had previously suspected that her master was a fugitive or a great sage. But now, there was no way to know. The next day, Marina reminded Danai, "Weren't you supposed to see young Master Cisse today?" Only then did Danai realize she had completely forgotten. Just as Danai was imagining the consequences of not keeping her promise to Cisse, Cisse had already appeared at her door. Cisse was as efficient as ever, directly asking Danai what she wanted to see him about. Only then did Danai remember that she was seeing Cisse today because of the clothes issue. She heard that the heads of the collateral families were all returning for the Senate meeting, and as a thorn in their side, even her clothes were so tattered. The thought that even if she behaved, those people would want to get rid of her made her angrier. She decided to display the dignity of the Grand Duke Asenov's granddaughter. Just as Danai was about to state her purpose, she noticed Cisse still looked very tired. She then asked Cisse if he was feeling unwell. Cisse said he was just a little tired because the guy they caught wouldn't talk easily. But then he realized he seemed to have accidentally let something slip. Danai also realized they were definitely hiding something from her. Danai remembered hearing someone say they had caught the mastermind behind the carriage attack. So she deduced that Cisse must have used magic that affects the other person's mind for interrogation. And this kind of magic consumes a lot of mana. She suddenly grabbed Cisse and led him to her bed and said, "Didn't you come today to help me? Then hurry up and lie down." Although Cisse was very confused at Danai's request, he eventually lay down. Then, Danai actually started singing a lullaby to Cisse. But Cisse complained, "Danai's hands are still so thin. Had he been eating properly?" Finally, amidst their bickering, Cisse fell into a deep sleep. Looking at this charming face, Danai couldn't help but sigh. Cisse must be the most handsome man in the Empire, provided he doesn't open his mouth to speak. At this, Marina who was standing by, thought their relationship is so good. When he's with the young lady, young Master Cisse seems like a different person. It's the same with Lucas and Baelation. Although they pretend to be the same as usual, these changes are clearest to us servants. It turned out that before Dani came here, this place was, just as its name suggests, a desolate place like winter. The young lady is like warm sunshine, Marina said. A few days later, the Senate meeting finally began. Previously, the Winter Estate rarely allowed outsiders to enter. Now, many people claiming to be companions of the invitees followed them in. Marina reminded her, at the meeting, everyone's eyes will probably be on the young lady. The young lady might get involved in a commotion, so it's best not to go to the annex until the meeting is over. But she overlooked one thing. Visitors might break the rules, just like now. Who are you? Are you a new maid? However, this rude person was the young lady of the Ozit family, the most influential among the collateral branches. It seems she wasn't lost, but deliberately pretending not to know her. Because she disliked the true heir, she wanted to come out and say a few words to spite Dani. Since that was the case, Dani decided to give her a taste of her own medicine. She directly asked Marina to send this lost guest back to the annex. This angered the lady, who started cursing. Just as she was about to argue further, a hand stopped her. The girl claimed it was her younger sister being impolite and apologized to Dani. Then, the girl introduced herself. Her name was Kana Ozit. She seemed very polite, completely different from her sister. She even made Dani want to continue talking with her. But she was picked up by Baelation, who had just arrived. He knew very well that the girl had deliberately walked here. He then carried Dani away from there. After everyone had left, Kana's expression turned grim. Dani, being carried away by Baelation, struggled constantly. But Baelation didn't react at all. So she questioned Baelation, "Why did you treat a polite girl with that kind of attitude just now?" Baelation was amused again. He retorted to Dani, "Do you know who she is? Kana Ozit is the most advantageous candidate among Brother Lucas's potential fiancé, copyright ES. Do you know how they trouble my brother? And to make their daughter my brother's fiancé copyright E, they used all sorts of dirty tricks." At this point, Baelation found it hard to continue. If even Baelation found it hard to say, how vicious must it have been? Just then, Baelation realized they brought Kana here. Could it be they haven't given up yet? Baelation glanced at Dani on his shoulder, then hugged her tightly. He reminded Dani to just not go out recently. He was very serious, telling Dani to avoid meeting people from the collateral families as much as possible. But Dani felt that hiding was not the Asenov way. Baelation was curious who said that, of course, it was Brother Lucas. Baelation grumbled, "That brother of mine always pretends to be pitiful. He's ruining the child." But he still emphasized, whether it's the Asenov way or not, it's best to hide when you're in danger. It's 100 times better than being caught and beaten to death. So after that, Dani spent her days idly. During this time, Marina would bring her a large pile of letters requesting an audience every day. They were all very curious about this suddenly appeared granddaughter of the Grand Duke. She had no idea who she should or shouldn't see, so she thought she couldn't see anyone. So Dani ended up rejecting all of them. Dani was yawning at the window when a bird flew over and kept tapping on it. The bird tapped so frantically that the window was about to break. Dani had no choice but to let it in. As a result, the bird shot inside and spoke in a human voice, "My king, I've finally found you." Dani's memories flooded back. There was only one person who had ever called her that, the very culprit who caused her to be mistaken for the Demon King and die unjustly. At this moment, Dani tried to comfort herself. "Did I miss here?" But the bird continued to call out, saying he was Blanche. Angered, Dani grabbed the bird and threw it out. She then closed the window and drew the curtains. But the bird actually flew back again. Dani had to play dumb, saying she didn't know any Demon King. But Blanche said he knew Dani must remember, because he was the one who made her reincarnate and awaken her memories. It took him a lot of effort to find his king. He managed to get Dani to reincarnate 13 years ago and only recently awaken her memories. But he never dreamed that his king would be reincarnated as a descendant of this crappy magical family. But it didn't matter. At least he succeeded. Then, a magic circle flashed. The bird actually transformed into the form of a child, even smaller than Dani. Blanche couldn't help it, because the magic wall was too strong. He had used up all his power to penetrate it. To learn that someone had been painstakingly trying to resurrect her for 500 years, this obsession situation was too insane. Dani realized that running away was not a panacea, so she had to give an order to the expectant Blanche. Now cross the wall and go home. But Blanche said this task was very difficult for him because he had already used up his power. He didn't have the strength to go back. But soon, Dani thought of another way. She sent Blanche to find something. That something was the herb. And so Dani finally found peace, because that was not an easy herb to find. By the time he found the herb, his power would probably have recovered. One day, the Grand Duke said he wanted to see Dani, but he kept his head buried in work. When he finally had some free time, he called Dani over. He wanted to give Dani a key. This was the key to the treasure vault. Because it was enchanted with a special magic, it only reacted to the Asenov bloodline, whenever and wherever. As long as you think of the treasure vault in your heart, its entrance will appear before you. I'm rich. This was the treasure vault of the Asenov clan. How much gold and silver must there be? And the Grand Duke also said this was not a gift for the Asenov heir, but a gift for Dani. Even if Dani didn't become the heir, the Grand Duke would give it to her. But after this, the Senate might use an exam to prove whether Dani is suitable to be the heir. The Senate supports Lucas. They won't be easily defeated. They will try every means to find fault with Dani. So no matter the outcome, the Grand Duke won't blame Dani. It could be said that this cold-looking grandfather doted on Dani very much. Then the Grand Duke also suggested, if you really don't want to lose face, then marrying Lucas is also a good choice. But Dani didn't want to cause more trouble for her grandfather. She immediately shouted that she would become the heir no matter what. After all, she also wanted to rescue Lucas from the mire of political marriage, and then take control of the family's jurisdiction into her own hands. Seeing his granddaughter's determination, the Grand Duke respected her decision. He also assigned Lucas to be Dani's adjutant during the exam. Compared to this good news, what made her happier was this treasure vault. It contained countless gold and silver treasures. Dani couldn't stop smiling, but then she saw something. Among the jewels was her own bag. It must have been picked up by Pamela as a trophy after he killed her 500 years ago. Fortunately, even after 500 years, the magic on the bag was still effective. Dani used magic to unlock the bag. She pulled out a necklace from a bag. This necklace was a relic of her master. When her master was alive, the gem on this necklace should have been sky blue. For some reason, it had lost its color, but Dani still put on the necklace. Then she also saw that there were still pills her master had made for her in the bag. After 500 years, she didn't know if they had expired. Dani swallowed one in one gulp. Then Dani fell asleep on the spot. Not long after, she sat up, and this was also part of the training. Finally recovering a little magic, Dani contentedly pushed open the vault door, only to find her 3 brothers waiting anxiously outside. Only then did she realize she had been in the vault for 4 days. All 3 were very worried about her, wondering if something had happened inside. Dani had to take out a few treasures she had taken from a vault and give them to the 3 as gifts. She lied, saying she was just picking out gifts for the 3 of them in the vault. But Cisse still gave her a stern talking to, harshly reprimanding her. Dani hadn't expected her training to take 4 days. Just then, she remembered the matter of the Senate. Lucas told her that the Senate strongly opposed Dani becoming the heir, so they would test Dani through an exam. Then Cisse took out a letter, and this was the exam question the Senate had given Dani. After that, Lucas, as his grandfather had said, would be Dani's super assistant, helping Dani pass the exam. But she didn't expect Lucas to be so proactive. And Lucas was indeed a genius. He knew everything about the territory's affairs. The biggest task of the Grand Duke Asenov is investment. Simply put, it's to constantly make money. The reason they still have to make money even when they're overflowing with it is because 500 years ago, when the demon tribe invaded the north, the northern lands were occupied and used as the demon tribe's base, suffering huge losses. Although the restoration work has been completed, the losses suffered at that time have not been fully recovered, and the cost of restoration has always been borne by the Asenov family, who governs the territory. Due to the harsh environment, all resources needed to operate the territory have to be purchased from outside, and the prices of resources can change at any time. Even the maintenance fees for the Magic Tower, where Cisse belongs, and the Night Order, where Heading is, are paid by the Asenov family. So, there are many unseen expenses. Therefore, to cope with unknown changes, they have to earn a lot of money in advance. So the Senate's exam item is to make money. The Senate gave Danai a sum of money. If the funds increase after 3 months, the exam is passed. If they decrease, it's a fail. And the money they gave Danai was actually 1 billion. Danai thought, if the Grand Duke's granddaughter wanted to invest 1 billion gold coins in a business, the most skilled businessmen in the country would probably flock to her. She would pick and choose carefully, and after a successful investment, she would transfer all the assets of this damned family away. Then Lucas mentioned, they have to do well in the exam, because after the exam is the social season. It's a gathering of nobles held annually in the capital. There will also be the founding day, and the royal family's party will be held there. Danai was very interested after hearing this, but this required asking her grandfather, because they had followed the Grand Duke's wishes and hadn't attended once in 7 years. And the Grand Duke agreed without hesitation. And the task of teaching Danai to dance naturally fell to Sisei. However, he soon discovered something. That was that she had no talent for dancing. Her feet were practiced until they were red and swollen. Sisei even suggested that Danai stand on his feet, so it would look like they were dancing together. Just then, Baelation, who had heard that Danai was learning to dance, also rushed over. As soon as these two brothers met, they started bickering. Just as Danai was about to sneak away, she was picked up by Baelation. He saw Danai's scraped feet. He wanted to take Danai wherever she wanted to go. Just then, Danai saw Blanche outside the window. Danai suddenly let out a scream, startling her brothers. She immediately told Baelation she wanted to go back to her room. After the two of them sent Danai back to her room, Danai lied that she wanted to sleep and shooed them away. Blanche also flew in through the window. Danai yelled at him, ordering him not to talk to her in front of others, no matter what happened. Blanche just silently indicated that he understood. Then he took out a handful of flowers. Danai didn't expect Blanche to actually find it, and so quickly. He had searched day and night and finally found it in a place in the south of Wufeng where the magic barrier was very weak, and he only took a part of it. The south was exactly where she used to live with her master. Then she told Blanche to go back and get 10 times the amount. After making that many pills, her stamina should recover to the point where she could knock Blanche down. What Blanche wanted was indeed to stay by Danai's side after getting those flowers. Danai asked if the weakening of the magic barrier starting 15 years ago was the work of the demon world. But Blanche said it was because of black magic. That kind of magic could penetrate the barrier and affect this world, possibly with the intention of breaking the barrier. Danai couldn't help but feel a little flustered. Could the culprit who caused so many tragedies be herself? She had always followed her master's words, not to use the magic and secrets her master taught her to harm others. So when Pamela attacked her, she didn't fight back. If she had fought back with all her might, she probably wouldn't have died. But that would have violated her master's teachings. But things still developed this way. Danai decided to pull herself together and not be confused by the past anymore. She wanted Blanche to teach her how to repair the barrier. But Blanche knew nothing about it. He just wanted to stay by Danai's side. Helpless, Danai had to compromise. But Danai wanted Blanche to deal with the magical beast that crossed the barrier. Only when not dealing with magical beasts could he appear as a bird. They could only talk when they were alone. Only then did Blanche show a triumphant smile. Later, Marina entered the room and saw the little bird, finding it very cute. And she was delivering a letter to Danai. Danai had spread the news that she was looking to invest, and immediately a pile of letters from businessmen arrived. And Danai had to find the goose that lays golden eggs in this pile of letters. But she soon discovered that she had been too optimistic. Among the countless proposals, all were empty promises and vague words. But just then, she saw something incredible in a letter. The letter said that a long time ago, his ancestor came to the continent and engaged in trade, accumulating a large fortune. But one day, after completing a transaction involving the family's entire fortune, the ship encountered a typhoon and sank into the sea. That ship was called the Celester. It was carrying a huge amount of trade funds and the family's treasures. Because of this incident, their family went bankrupt, so they were unable to salvage it. After reading this letter, Lucas didn't know what to say. And Danai's reason was that the treasure ship was cool, and she felt sorry that the family treasure was buried. Lucas was even more at a loss for words. Of course, Danai wasn't interested in this letter for these reasons. The real reason she was so sure was that she had heard the elves in Wufeng mention that ship. What a coincidence! And Danai had already invited the other party to the estate. He claimed to have found his ancestor's logbook from a few years ago and had accurately pinpointed the location of the shipwreck. But he even got the name of the ship wrong. This made Lucas very suspicious. But Dani insisted on signing a contract with this guy who looked like a swindler. The man was suddenly very moved. He could finally reclaim his family's heirloom. But Dani proposed a 70/30th split of the profits. The man readily accepted. He also knew very well that without the help of the Grand Duke's family, he would never be able to salvage that ship. In the annex of the Winter Estate, they heard that Dani had started to take action. Kana, however, told her father not to worry, because she found out that the merchant who went to negotiate was a famous beggar baron. She also thought that Lucas really wanted to be the Grand Duke. After all, everything he did was to sit in the position he had longed for since childhood, and then spend the rest of his life squandering the power in his hands. That way, her family could help her father pay off his debts. Originally, the two were very likely to get married. Her father used this as collateral to borrow money everywhere, and used the borrowed money for gambling. But one day, the Grand Duke's granddaughter suddenly appeared, and their marriage became something that had never happened. Kana was very unwilling. She had lived under her father's violence every day and had climbed to today's position with great difficulty. She must get what belongs to her. A few days later, Lucas suddenly came to Dani's room excitedly. He brought good news. Dani's judgment was correct. A letter came from a man saying they had found the ship, and the number of gold coins in the ship was even more than expected. At the current price of gold coins, they could earn more than double what was expected, including the principal. The man will give Dani 140 billion, and the man can also resume the trading business passed down from his ancestors. He is also very grateful to Dani. The merchant group will always help Dani. She earned 130 billion. The exam was already passed. Dani would become the heir with her head held high, then squander the money and ruin this family. Lucas looked at Dani with new eyes. This also made him realize that numbers and probability are not necessarily the key to determining the success of an investment. Judging from other perspectives is also something worth considering. Although Dani thought to herself, "Please don't learn from me. If it weren't for the inside information, I would have lost everything." In the time that followed, perhaps because the news that Dani had earned 140 billion had spread, more businessmen sent her letters. But the 3-month exam period was not over yet. She could only pretend to be a faithful heir and continue to read the letters. But on this day, she welcomed an unexpected guest, Kana. She invited Dani to go to an auction with her. Although Dani didn't dislike Kana, even Baelation was very wary of her. Dani couldn't help but suspect that this woman had ulterior motives. But Dani chose to play along, cooperating with her performance and agreeing to go to the auction together. On the day of the auction, Dani, who had intended to just observe, was surprised to find they were seated in the buyer's section. And Kana's explanation was that Dani herself had said she really wanted to participate. And the fun of an auction lies in recognizing a precious item at a glance, judging its value and appraising it. And Sisei, as Dani's protector and guard, also came along. Only then did Dani understand Kana's purpose. Depending on the bidder's judgment at the auction, one could make a lot of money or suffer a loss. For her, a 13-year-old child who was a commoner not long ago, how could she tell if an auction item was a treasure at a glance? Dani guessed that Kana was planning to use the auction as an excuse to make her squander all the property she had earned. But she immediately reassured the two of them that she would definitely buy something amazing and surprise everyone. However, in the time that followed, no matter how Kana fanned the flames, Dani remained unmoved. This was already the 20th auction item. Kana was still explaining at the side, "He's a great painter. Even the royal family commissions him to paint. You'll regret it if you don't make a move." But Dani knew that a painting's value only increases after the artist's death. What's the use of buying a work by a living artist? Seeing that she couldn't persuade Dani, Kana became so anxious, she even grabbed her hand. Just then, Baelation coolly interjected, "Then you buy it." Only then did Dani remember, and immediately praised Kana for having great artistic taste. She also helped her raise her hand. Guest number 4 bids 500 million. Just as Kana realized what was happening, The host had already congratulated her on winning the landscape painting for $500 million. In the time that followed, Dani kept helping Kana raise her hand, acquiring one collectible after another. And the last item was a carpet inscribed with an ancient language. The starting price was only 1,000 gold coins. And this distorted script made everyone think it was a fake. But Dani could tell at a glance that it was definitely the language of the ancient magical kingdom of Lem, and Lucas would definitely be able to understand it. She decisively raised her number plate for the first time. In the end, she won the carpet for a closing price of $5,000. Later, when Dani brought the carpet home, Lucas was stunned. He also recognized it as the language of the ancient kingdom of Lem. A coordinate was marked on it, and the text below read, "Before the end of days, we have left here the relics we wish to pass on to future generations." This meant that this carpet was a kind of treasure map. If they could really find this place, they would be rich. The two immediately took action, telling the Magic Tower about this and looking for help. A few days later, the genius Lucas went into action. He deciphered the coordinates in one day, wrote out the materials needed for excavation, and at the same time obtained the excavation permit. The Magic Tower also sent an excavation team to help them. Cisse even personally led the excavation team to the coordinate location. Moreover, the Senate exam was about to end. If this excavation yielded something, Dani's position as heir would be even more secure. On the day the excavation team set out, Dani came to see her brother off. But she didn't expect someone going on an excavation to dress like this. Even Balation couldn't help but complain. "I thought he was going out to find a bride." Then the two began their classic bickering session. Fortunately, Lucas was there to mediate, and they stopped. Dani told Cisse not to work so hard looking for the relics. She didn't want to lose her brother over some relics. She also hoped Cisse would return soon. And Cisse asked her how many fingers she had. "Just count one a day. When you count the last one, I'll be back." This was also Cisse's unique way of responding. At this point, Dani was curious. Cisse seemed different from usual, showing a strong interest in this matter. And why did the kingdom of Lem fall? The two brothers looked at her in surprise. Only then did Lucas remember that he had only taught Dani about the political situation in the north, but not common knowledge. Fortunately, the social season was coming up. There was a very good teacher he could introduce to Dani. And this teacher turned out to be Hedding's older brother. Not expecting this situation, the flustered younger brother. Hedding's older brother is a member of the Magic Tower. The research department he belongs to not only studies the history and technical use of magic, but also researches many other topics. So he was very busy. He could only explain the core content. The reason Lem disappeared is rumored to be that a meteorite fell from the sky one day. Lem disappeared due to the impact of the meteorite, although there are many doubtful points. So if they can really excavate the relics of Lem, it could be said to be a major historical discovery of the century. So they're also very much looking forward to it. Next, he was going to talk about the imperial royal family. The ancestor of the royal family used some kind of great power to unify the continent and establish the current empire. And that great power was the omnipotence of the dragon. People called the omnipotence of the dragon Galadriel. Dani was a bit slow to react. Isn't Galadriel a person's name? Hedding's brother said that if someone had that name, they would have been thrown in prison long ago, because the royal family tried every means to hide the omnipotence of the dragon. In the few records of Lem, Galadriel was mentioned. He was the primordial dragon. Therefore, some people speculate that the royal family did not obtain omnipotence, but met a dragon who possessed omnipotence. At this point, Dani couldn't listen anymore. Master was actually a dragon, but a dragon with omnipotence wouldn't die of illness. So what was her master's origin? A few days later, there were only 3 days left until the date Cisse had promised. In 3 days, the Senate's exam would also be over. These past few days, Dani's mind was always thinking about the dragon, her master, and the fact that Cisse hadn't sent a single letter back. Just then, she thought of the constantly chattering Blanche beside her. She wanted Blanche to fly and see how Cisse was doing. Until the last night of the Senate exam, Marina rushed to tell the young lady that young Master Cisse had returned. And Cisse, in order to keep his promise, used spatial magic to return, so he was very tired. And the thing he brought back from Lem was this small gold coin. He explained that this was a relic of Lem, and that it would be impossible to make something like this now. On that small gold coin, densely carved, were ancient magic formulas. The specifics could only be known after the exam was over and a thorough investigation was conducted at the Magic Tower. But this was an unprecedented discovery. The reason it took so long was because of crustal movement. The coordinates were not precise. But in the end, a bird appeared and told him the exact location. It was obvious that this bird was Blanche. Danai, wanting to deal with Blanche, considered that he had helped Cisse find the entrance after all and let him off. At the same time, in the annex of the Winter Estate, Danai not only didn't spend money, but also earn more. This made her father very angry, and he even hit her. Even so, Kana still smiled and said she would put everything back in its place. On the day the Senate exam results were announced, Danai was about to push open the door to the Senate room. The door didn't open. Instead, a magic circle suddenly flashed under her feet. Heading and the others were terrified. Danai fell into some space. It was Blanche who transformed into a human and saved Danai. On the other side, at the Winter Estate, Cisse was using magic to track Danai's location, but was blocked by the magic of several magicians. But the Grand Duke frowned and turned to leave. He was going to question the culprit. It seemed that Grandpa already knew who was behind this. Danai discovered that there was a sound coming from here. She walked over and saw a trapped person. Danai immediately untied the ropes binding her. After taking off the hood, she discovered that it was a cat person girl. The cat person girl also cried and told her that they were probably about to be sold. Just then, the dungeon door opened and a group of people walked in. From their conversation, Danai realized that this was a group of human traffickers, and Danai had become the goods they were talking about. Just as the traffickers were about to put the two of them into a box, Danai pointed to the side. "What's that?" Just as everyone's attention was diverted, Blanche attacked. The men didn't know who had ambushed them and were thrown into chaos. On the Grand Duke's side, he walked into the Senate. He gave the senators present 10 minutes. If the kidnapper didn't confess in 10 minutes, he would cut off one arm of everyone here. After another 10 minutes, he would cut off their other arm. And after another 10 minutes, he would cut off their legs. Finally, he would cut off the heads of everyone present. It was clear that the Grand Duke was truly enraged, and it didn't look like he was just scaring them. The senators were thrown into chaos. Some senators found it absurd and wanted to leave directly. But this place was already surrounded by the Grand Duke's nightly order. No one could leave without his permission. Suddenly, all the senators fell into a panic, suspecting each other or begging the Grand Duke to reconsider. 10 minutes passed. Just as the Grand Duke drew his sword, preparing to cut off everyone's arms, Kana rushed in, and she wasn't here to surrender, but to identify her own father as the one who orchestrated this kidnapping. The evidence was that he knew where Danai was. Her father was about to curse this unfilial daughter, but was stopped by the Grand Duke. He wanted to know the details. The traffickers were about to put the two in a box, but Danai's resistance was particularly fierce. Just then, a tremor was felt. The men all stopped what they were doing. The dungeon door smashed directly into a trafficker's face. It turned out to be Baelation breaking down the door. He was furious. "Get your filthy hands off the kid." The traffickers exclaimed, "What are the magicians outside doing?" A ghostly figure weaved through the crowd. The next second, he was behind a trafficker, the tip of his sword pressed against the back of the trafficker's head. "Hands behind your back, face down on the ground." Cisse made a cool entrance. He was very angry at this moment. However, another trafficker had grabbed Danai, putting up a futile resistance. But then the Grand Duke walked out. "I'd like to hear how you plan to dispose of the heir to the Asenov family." Seeing the Grand Duke himself, these traffickers also realized they seemed to have kidnapped someone they shouldn't have touched. They all dropped their weapons. Just then, Cisse found a blue feather on the ground. He was about to ask when he noticed Danai's dress was torn. Danai said she tore her dress to stop the bleeding. Hearing that his sister was bleeding, Cisse flew into a rage. He was already chanting a spell at the traffickers, and the Grand Duke also raised his sharp sword. Danai quickly explained that it wasn't to stop her own bleeding. After much hardship, Danai finally successfully took the position of the little Grand Duke. But her first task was, how many candles to buy this year? Danai didn't understand. She had earned so much money. Why was she being asked to do such a boring thing? Lucas comforted her while explaining that Danai was still too young. It would be difficult for her to run the territory now. She could only learn step by step. And although she passed the exam, the process was not satisfactory. Only then did Danai realize they thought she passed the exam because of good luck, but she had actually succeeded by gathering intelligence. However, she couldn't explain this point, which was very frustrating. Just then, Sisei walked in. He brought something for Danai. It was actually an invitation to the royal party. Since she had become the official heir, Sisei felt it was necessary for her to make an appearance in the social circle. Danai naturally agreed happily. At the hearing, Kana stated that she had abandoned her family to protect the young lady. Everyone else hoped Lucas would become the heir, but she firmly believed that Danai was the true heir. To show her sincerity, she could only report her own father. The Grand Duke asked Kana how he should thank her, but Kana showed a sinister smile. She wanted to use this incident as an opportunity. Kana actually became Danai's savior. As a thank you, she told the Grand Duke that after exposing this matter, she had nowhere else to go. She begged the Grand Duke to let her live in the annex of the Winter Estate. But the Grand Duke was still very worried, so he let Kana live in another Asenov house located in the suburbs of the capital. After all, with so many eyes watching, no matter what, she had nominally saved Danai. The Grand Duke just appropriately made a place for her, wanting this matter to just pass. The Asenov family hadn't been to the capital in 7 years. Bringing her along was just a matter of convenience. But when Danai was in the capital, she could only stay with Kana. Also, Lucas did not accompany them to the capital this time, because 500 years ago, it was a tradition left by the great magician Pamel to steadfastly guard the Winter Estate. The Grand Duke had signed the invitation and couldn't go back on his word. Sisei was to test Danai's dancing progress. Baelation, as Danai's accompanying secretary and guard, would definitely go along. The next day, Danai showed off to the two of them that she had received a tea party invitation from the princess, who knew that the two of them would immediately change their expressions, telling her to quickly throw it away or burn it. It turned out the princess had fallen in love with brother Lucas at first sight, pursued him for several years, and was very annoying. After being rejected by her brother, she started digging up dirt on Lucas everywhere. For some reason, Lucas was always entangled with people like this. So even popular guys have their own troubles. But Danai still really wanted to go. She felt that accepting the invitation to maintain relations with the royal family could also build the prestige of the little Grand Duke. And her grandfather would only let her do things like deciding how many candles to buy. She wanted to get her grandfather's approval and have him entrust her with proper matters. At this point, Sisei also remembered what Lucas had said to him before leaving. He wanted Danai to do what she wanted in the capital. Because of the long-term abuse she had suffered, he was worried that Danai would have low self-esteem. Then the two of them stopped trying to dissuade her and let Danai go to the tea party. But they had to go too. Later, Danai arrived at the tea party venue. The scale was larger than she had imagined, but it didn't seem suitable for men to be here. So the princess had the twins wait in another room. Just then, the princess also came to greet Danai. This person was Princess Aira. Danai responded politely, but found that there was a bit of sourness and a sting in the other's words. Danai only found it very interesting that this my first heartbreak as the little Grand Duke. Princess Aira was very flustered. She had heard that Danai was a granddaughter picked up from the countryside and thought she was a country bumpkin. But turned out that this country bumpkin was so beautiful, and her elegant demeanor didn't make one think she was a commoner just a short while ago. Her taste in clothes was also impeccable, and her smile was so bright. The more the princess thought about it, the angrier she got. She then began to describe how high-class the food at the tea party was. The tea leaves were also specially grown in the south, implicitly mocking Danai for being a country bumpkin from the north, tried to provoke Danai into talking back to her, who knew that Danai would just smile sweetly at the princess and thank her, also praising the princess's beauty and kindness. This dealt a heavy blow to the princess. Afterwards, Danai also praised her for being willing to share and being very generous, almost like the goddess who gave power to the Asenov hero, Pamel. This arrogant princess was completely won over by Danai's praise. That night, Danai returned to the residence with a pile of tea leaves. These were all top-grade tea leaves gifted by the princess. Baelation praised her, saying she must have made the princess happy. But Danai said she didn't coax her. Apart from being pretty, she had no fighting power at all. She was just an ordinary girl, and the day after tomorrow, she had to go to the palace. The princess had invited her to go boating and told her to go alone. On the day of the date with the princess, Danai was very happy. It was her first time boating. The important thing was that she could also eat delicious food. And the princess, as promised, sent a luxurious carriage and the royal guard. Just as she was about to get on the carriage, Sisei rushed over. He put a ring on Danai's finger. Then he hugged Danai tightly. Actually, Sisei wanted to tell her that he had cast a protection spell on the ring, so she must not take it off. At this moment, the royal guard was very moved. The Asenovs, who were rumored not to shed a single drop of blood even when stabbed, cared so much for their sister. After arriving at the palace, the attendants informed Danai that the princess, in anticipation of meeting the young lady, hadn't slept well. So she had just woken up. She might have to wait with the other young ladies in the guest room for a while. But Danai wanted to stroll in the palace garden. After all, it was really beautiful here. The butler couldn't say much, only asking Danai not to wander too far. Arriving in the garden, Danai found that the palace garden was truly beautiful. There was also a large lake. In her previous life, she had always lived in Wufeng and had never seen such good weather and such beautiful scenery. Just then, she sensed a killing intent. A sharp arrow flew towards her. Danai hurriedly dodged. A figure walked out from the woods. It was actually a very thin and bewildered boy. The next second, he was tripped by a branch and fell. Danai had no choice but to extend a hand to the boy and pull him up. Afterwards, Danai introduced herself. Only then did the boy realize that the girl in front of him was a descendant of Pamel, and also the girl Aira had mentioned. So the boy also formally introduced himself. He was the second prince of the Geranda Empire, Royas. Only then did Danai remember. He was the one known as the Aloof Lily, the second prince. Seeing Danai say his nickname to his face, he was particularly embarrassed. When Danai asked him why he was shooting arrows, he remembered to apologize. Royas was preparing for the hunting competition, but because he wasn't as strong as his older brother, he kept making mistakes. Just then, he noticed Danai's hat was crooked. It was probably because of his arrow. The guilty second prince wanted to help Danai straighten her hat, but it triggered the protection spell on Danai's ring. The next second, the second prince flew into the air. Danai wanted to save him, but she forgot she didn't have much strength. She could only fall into the water with the second prince. And the second prince also lost consciousness. Danai had to hold onto the second prince. Wanting to surface, she seemed to find some kind of resistance and couldn't get up at all. But just then, her master's necklace lit up. The next second, she was propelled out of the water by a current. Finally back on shore, Danai hadn't recovered yet, but she found that her necklace had turned back to its original blue color. Just then, the guards and maids also noticed the commotion here and rushed over. Even Princess Aira rushed over. Danai panicked. To anyone, it looked like she had put the second prince in danger. The royal family would definitely not let her go. But just then, the second prince also woke up. Forced to, Danai was about to tell the truth. But to her surprise, the second prince took all the blame, claiming it was because of him that things got this way. It was also he who tripped and fell into the river. It was Danai who saved him. Lady Danai was his savior. Danai was very moved. The second prince had actually covered for her. Afterwards, the second prince whispered to her, "Can we just pretend this never happened?" That night, in the Asenov's capital residence, Sisei was furious. Did the second prince bully Danai? Danai wanted to explain, but Sisei insisted on thinking so. Just then, the Grand Duke walked in, asking what the two were arguing about. Sisei had to explain that because Danai went to the royal family alone, he was very worried and gave Danai a magic ring. And the protection spell was triggered. The Grand Duke immediately showed concern for Danai. "What exactly did the second prince do to you?" Danai reported truthfully that the second prince wanted to help her straighten her hat, but was sent flying by Sisei's ring. But the crown prince also helped her hide the truth. Only then did the Grand Duke understand what this letter was about. It turned out the prince had sent an apology letter. He just wanted to see what was going on. He was relieved to hear that Danai was safe. Afterwards, the Grand Duke gave Danai a gift. After opening it, Danai discovered it was a blue gown, very magnificent. Because the royal party was coming up, the Grand Duke had ordered a blue gown for his little beauty. Danai immediately returned to her room to change. Just as her father was about to leave, he suddenly turned to look at Sisei. He praised Sisei's actions. Sisei was very happy. After all, he didn't know how long it had been since he had received praise from the Grand Duke. A few days later, Danai received another gift. After opening the gift box, she found it was another gown, and the cinder was actually Royaz. Although she still had to wear the one her grandfather gave her, it didn't stop her from wearing this one later. When Sisei found out, he told Danai to throw it away, afraid the emperor would get ideas and have Danai get together with the second prince. Danai thought it was too absurd that I asked my brother overthinking things. But Sisei told her that Royaz's mother was of low status, so he was excluded from the candidates for emperor from the beginning. So getting a decent title and living quietly in the countryside or becoming the son-in-law of a noble family was the best choice for Royaz. If Danai dated Royaz, it would be playing right into the royal family's hands. On the day of the royal party, Kana shamelessly requested a ride in the same carriage as Danai. However, when Sisei arrived, he directly ignored Kana and urged Danai to hurry up. But Kana still called out to Sisei, asking if she could go with him. She needed to get Sisei's permission. Only then did Danai realize that what she meant was that she didn't put her, the little head of the family, in her eyes at all. But Sisei looked at Danai and said, "Whether our carriage should carry someone from a collateral family is for you, the heir of the Asenov family, to decide. What do you plan to do, little Grand Duke?" So Danai told Kana to take another carriage. She had come here in a carriage. Kana didn't expect Danai to refuse her so tactfully. She even had to thank Danai. But after the two left, she immediately gritted her teeth. After getting on the carriage, Sisei felt that Danai's performance just now was barely passable. Afterwards, the group finally arrived at the royal party that Danai had been looking forward to. Inside were all kinds of delicious food, elegant music, and people in gorgeous clothes. But Danai didn't expect the Grand Duke to be so popular. What she didn't expect even more was that Sisei and Baelation were also so popular. But the flow of people and the mix of various perfume scents in the air made Danai dizzy for a moment. The twins also noticed their sister's discomfort and immediately pushed through the crowd to lead Danai away. But Danai noticed many people whispering behind their backs that they were adopted because the Grand Duke felt sorry for them. Danai was instantly furious. These cowards who only dared to whisper behind their backs. Magical beasts appeared in the north, cruelly destroying many villages and families. The twins were the same, right? But what does that have to do with being pitiful? Thinking of this, Danai couldn't help but pat the two brothers' heads. The two were a little shocked. Danai said she just felt it had been a little hard on the two of them. Afterwards, Danai recovered her composure. She was going to eat a lot of delicious food. But even while eating, she was pestered by Sisei and Baelation's fangirls, who asked all sorts of questions. Not to mention, there were people constantly whispering on the side. But seeing Sisei looking at them, they immediately turned away. Sisei felt that rather than dealing with these rats, it was better to win everyone's praise with strength. He then pulled Danai to dance, and the fangirls on the side were almost mesmerized. A guard shouted, "His Majesty the Emperor and the Imperial family are entering." But just then, Danai noticed that Kana was standing right beside her grandfather, wearing the very formal dress the second prince had given her. She clearly remembered hanging it in her room. The prince might misunderstand and think that she had given his gift to someone else. That would be terribly rude.